in technology. So, first of all, Philip, thank you for inviting me. Philip, you might have a regret. I tried to ring you a few times, as you said you've ignored my phone calls. And I was going to ask you whether you wanted my short talk or my long talk. So you should be worried which one I brought with me. And those that know me will be even more worried now. I think, first of all, strangely, until I arrived at RBST 4 years ago, or just over 4 years ago, I didn't realise I'd actually met Shep over 40 years ago. And I've been reminded, unfortunately since he passed away, that I had met him at that stage. Because my sort of history is, I come from a peasant farming background, and my dad didn't keep rare breeds, or did he? We had British Friesians, which this year will come onto the native breeds list for RBST. We had landrace pigs, which are now the rarest of pigs. And I kept a range of chickens, which I enjoyed talking to Andrew about. I had leghorns, brown leghorns, light Sussex, and Old English game. And so it was very nice, since I've been here, to actually, I'd say, make friends with Andrew, but also to have a great mentor. I really don't think I need to read down that list, but I think all of us that knew Sheppy, and a lot of people that I know that aren't here today, he had a massive, massive influence on us. And like a lot of genetics, just because we've lost Andrew in the sort of physical sense, we haven't lost him. I think most of us, our lives were touched by him. Certainly my opinions about my job are much, much different because of Shep. I sort of think about my sort of talk and about have we lost genetics. And to some extent, I've got to do it on a more simplified way, because I can see that my qualifications to stand here is a grade B geography, agricultural biology O-level, I think. So I've got to be a bit careful. But when I first met Shep and the Rare Breeds of Arbitrus was just being formed, you know, when we talked about genetics, we were actually talking about how a cow looked, and we were looking at how many litres of milk it gave, how much butter fat it gave, how good it was on its legs. And boy, have things moved on since then. But actually, those principles are still very important. You know, these are commercial animals, even if they're rare breeds. And my job really should be to make all rare breeds extinct. And I think Andrew would agree with me like that. And by that, I don't mean that I want to kill off the rare breeds. I think what I want is I want marsh daisies so plentiful that they're no longer rare breeds. And that really should be the aim of anybody doing my sort of work. So I sort of agree with Libby when she turns around that people keep them because they're rare, and we have to change that thing. So I'm a bit different than most people. My best day with Andrew, and I am going to sort of talk about it because it's on that thing since I've been here, was about 2.5 years ago, and I've got a friend, Dan Sardino, coming over to do a radio show with him. And I think it's so, so important, this. And Andrew's there, and he's showing me the records and all this great, great work he's done. And I do mean great work, and we're talking about this, that, and the other. And eventually Dan, I don't know if anybody knows Dan, Dan's the main presenter now on the BBC Radio 4 food programme, which is probably the most influential food PR that you can get. And they got talking, and Andrew got very excited about the most tasty bird and whatever. And nobody talked about Andrew. Oh, yeah. And he said, I quite like the Ixworth because you can get loads out of it. But then he was so passionate and was so more like going red in the face about how wonderful it was to eat a marsh daisy. I still haven't had a marsh daisy. That's 2.5 years later. It is right towards the top of my bucket list to eat one of these rare breeds. And I think that is very, very important that we use these rare breeds, and we must do that. So I think the other conversation I had with Andrew at that time was the complete lack of government funding in the UK for our work, and I will put it down, and also sometimes the delay in our work, and I don't say this any embarrassment, I'm part of it, is that sometimes committees from, we're talking committees from the UN down to a committee that might be the 3 people running such a breed club, actually stop some of the work, and we mustn't let people stop our work, and we must get some money out of government. I am fed up with people telling me that our gene bank should be paid from this, that and the other. If I go to America, and I've had a good fortune with my job to spend some time in the States and other parts of the world, the gene banking work, which is so important, both the living but actually the cryogenic gene banks, and the things that I've been speaking to Rex about, it is the responsibility of the nation. We are doing this gene banking work for the nation, and the breeders on the ground are doing this work for the nation, for the greater public. So, great thing for them. So, I'll get on to what I was going to talk about. Is the UK achieving its goals? By that, I sort of really talk about I'm talking about the UK, I'm talking about government, I'm talking about industry, and I'm talking about civic society, as I would call it. So quite a few of us are involved in civic society, charities, universities, Joe Public. Are breed genetics being homogenised? Luckily, Andrew will give me some quite easy ways of explaining that one to you. Measurement is difficult. Have we lost genetic livestock traits? And I think a lot of those things have been covered, so Philippe, you're lucky, you're going to get the shorter version, you're okay. And I think with it being about Sheppy, we're talking about, do we actually know the scenarios with our livestock breeds? My dad started farming with white leghorns and light Sussex chickens and some Indian runner ducks, and that would be just after the Second World War. And I wonder, I don't know, and there'll be people here that know much better than I, is a light Sussex today the same one as my dad was killing and getting eggs out of over 5 decades, 6, 7 decades ago? I doubt it, but I don't know. Right, government goals. By government, I don't just mean the UK. I think, particularly when we talk about our things, I think most of our sort of standards have been set by the UN, by the FAO, and there's some really good work there. But I think one word of caution to those working with us, a lot of the work I've seen from the FAO, by the time it's got down to us, can be 10, 20 years old, and we need to start leapfrogging that. But they've done some good things. We've got some diversity indicators, and I think Libby and Rex and Tim have hit on these. And we are measuring population sizes. But there is no, as far as I'm really aware, for what hits me on my day job, and if they are there and it's not hitting me on my day job, then one, it is my fault, but then it's also other people's fault. There are no real measurements of genetic diversity with government across the breeds and across the species of native breeds, despite people talking about how important this is for the future. When we have an uncertain future, both economically, climate-wise, how many people are going to be on this planet eating more and more. Stuff that Libby's talked about, I think, before. These are the effective population sizes of the different livestock species, excluding poultry because we don't measure them. Pigs. Looks good. No, it doesn't. It's really bad. And there's a lot of people out there eating Gloucester Old Spot that's never seen a Gloucester Old Spot. And that's something I have to change, and I have to take responsibility to change. Equine numbers, it's really, really, really frightening, the equine numbers. Libby's talked about the hackneys, and we are going to start losing breeds of horses. And I was really struggling to get this around in my head, and really the guy probably we should have got standing here is our president of today, Jimmy Doherty, because this is actually his world. And Jimmy's talk on the heavy horses we've got, which I thought was good words, is that the heavy horses looked after us for centuries, and we need to look after them now because we don't know what we're going to need going forward. Sheep, it's in green, it's all looking good, numbers are going in the right direction. Have a look at the Border Leicester, a completely brilliant commercial breed, and the numbers are plummeting. There are a lot of sheep breeds in this country. So although the numbers are good and overall it's really good and we're doing a good job, within that species there are still breeds that are not doing as well. And then the rarest of the sheep breeds, the Boreret, it'll be interesting. Now they've won the best sausage competition, the best sausage at our competition last year. Will they continue to be rare? Or will they actually become more rare because they're not rare? That's the, I think you're nodding your head. Cattle. I think there's one or two things that are interesting come up already on cattle breeds here. Cattle breed numbers on overall for the native breeds in the UK, the effective numbers are doing well. I think of them as Ruth's Vainals. I don't know why I think of them as Ruth Vainals. I don't know Ruth, but she's the one that educates me about Vainals. And are there 20 breeding females in the UK now? Yeah. And if we then talk about some of the populations within the breeds, are they declining? But I think a really, really interesting thing, is a traditional Hereford actually different than a Hereford, or is a polled Hereford different than a traditional Hereford, whatever. And I think those debates are really good to have. But then I think I was going to call this talk Lies, Damn Lies and Statistics, and I think this is where we can come into that sort of frame. The goats is a really good story, but I think that's DEFRA numbers. Libby, I'm going to look at you. Is it 3 breeds with DEFRA they look after, or 2? Oh, is it 8, is it? Are we on the N-bar list? I think that's off. Yeah, so we look at 2. So it's off a very small base. But, it's not all... There are good stories. We haven't lost a breed since the 70s. but 50% of our rare breeds in the last 3 years have gone, of the rare breeds, have gone down in their population size by more than 5%, which is where I come on to civic society. So when we come to goals in the UK, I think the breed societies and ourselves and some of the universities do have some goals, but I don't know how clearly they're defined. Our goals will be much more clearly defined within a few months. We will have more in our gene bank. We will have policies in place to actually stop breeds declining, or at least work with people much clearer and stronger to do that. We already work very closely with a lot of the conservation organisations who probably in this area don't have goals set for them for how many wildlife trust reserves are grazing native breeds. But I think we need to go out as part of civic society, as universities, as campaigners, as breed societies, and we need to give them some goals. We need to turn around and go and tell them how many's being done, you know, and they need to be pushed to do more and see it as their biodiversity indicator. And it won't take a lot to bring those things out. And it's quite nice to sit around here. I was thinking about Shep and his Hebrideans, and we've got Richard here and his Hebrideans. You know, when I first saw Hebrideans, a mutual friend of a school friend of Shep's was did the books for my dad at home, and Vicky's still the registrar for the Hebs. But what an amazing job the Hebs have done on getting involved in taking what I assume was a very rare breed to being now a common day site when you go into a nature reserve. And that's a really good use for it, and having run nature reserves, and when Joe Public goes and sees a hare, a primitive on a nature reserve, they're really excited about seeing it, having the story. In fact, often it's the way you introduce people to wildlife on a nature reserve. It's actually not through the butterflies. It's actually when they come and they ask you about the dexters. Sorry, the last reserve I ran had 3 dexters and Hebs, so Andrew liked what I was doing, I think. So, but that's what they asked you about, and then you could start talking about the invertebrates and the other things. And then, which will actually, we now work a lot closer with the Livestock Conservancy. It's becoming a weekly occurrences talk, and it's so great because internationally our 2 organisations, probably the 2 that only do the same sort of work, and having colleagues on the other side of the pond that are talking about the same problems we have, and I think we're going to be able to do a lot more. Tullis Matson, who's one of my trustees, apologises for not being here today, but was just come back from the US having done an equine summit, and it looks like we're going to ping these equine summits so we can start working together, because they've got populations that we don't count in the States that may actually resolve some of the problems we've got. And we'll have a look at that. In my bag, I've got the RBST watch list. I'm assuming most people here know what the watch list is, but if anybody would like one of the watch lists to see it, but like the native breeds at risk register, they are what identifies it. I think one of the personal objectives that myself and the guys that are on Fangra here, Tim, I look at you, and Libby and Ruth, who works with me, and Beth, we have to actually start to amalgamate those 2 lists. We've had 2 lots of committees not actually make those 2 lists say together. Joe Public doesn't care whether we think this is that or that's that. We should have one list and talk with the same thing. It doesn't really matter who's right or wrong. I personally actually probably think, but don't tell anybody from my don't tell my chair of conservation, but I actually think the Fangra ones are probably more correct because who put the data together and whatever. So what we are doing, and I don't see why I mean the great as in we're doing much better breed analysis now, and organisations and businesses like Libby's and ourselves have done loads of work, and the grassroots Jenny Penny stuff. But I think it's really great to sit here with confidence and see people in this room that help us take that to the next level, and an affordable basis and an understandable level. And I'm really pleased when you get somebody who's representing the BPA here talking some common sense about we don't just do what we did before, and it's not just about what daddy looks like. It carries on through. It's about the proper genetics. Industry goals. I should twist this one round a little bit, because I'm saying, even in my short time, I've really been interested in the last 10 years, which is when I really came back to start looking at native breeds, and when I started to try to join RBST. They kept bouncing my cheque back at me, not because there was no money in my account, they just didn't actually put it through, but I did eventually get to join. But for 10 years we've been talking about what was eaten in the world in the last 10,000 years. In the next 50 years, we're going to eat as much. Think about that, folks. Right, that's 10 years ago that statement was said. But if you look at the populations, look at that, and there's loads of us with that. What was the news that came out last week? The average man in the UK eats 1,000 calories more than he declares every day, and the average woman 800 calories a day. There are probably people I've seen that would be pleased to have 800 or 1,000 calories a day. And if you certainly go back 150 years in the UK, there were a lot of Victorian factory workers that would have been quite happy to have eaten that much. And you look at the population sizes, it doesn't take much to do. So we are going to have to do something. But I don't see industry having a lot of goals for genetic diversity. But I don't actually blame industry for this, I blame me. Because I've got to educate them, it's my job to get there and educate them. And that's why Beth has got a job at the moment, because she's going to change the world of government. If I do that again, sorry. I had too much coffee, sorry. We have to do that. We have to do more and more with industry getting to do that. Having said that, industry's doing a great job. Our breeders are the people that are really doing the job on the ground. They are part of industry. There are restaurants. There's restaurants around here. Those that know me, I'm just about to mention Cyrus Toddywaller, who is buying North Ronaldsay lamb off the island. So there are people in industry that are doing some absolutely amazing things and sitting down with some of the larger companies and sitting down with Genus and asking questions. They're starting to get interested. Genus are now talking about buying back off us British Friesian bulls that are in our gene bank. They haven't quite done it yet, but I'm assuming, did you take those British Friesians in there, Tim? Or? Yeah. So we have 170 British Friesians from a scheme called the Dairy Progeny Testing Scheme in our gene bank, and those that were around at the time, they might not have ever actually been proved to be the best bulls, but by their selection criteria, they were of good phenotype and they were of good production type, so they're probably very useful. And as people now will want easier calving animals in certain fields and whatever, those genetics might become important again. I think that's I think all I really say about industry is if I don't do something and we don't do something, Andrew will be looking down from us up there and he'll be waving his fingers at us. So let's get industry and government involved. Seriously, and it's our job. Let's not blame somebody else for it. We have to turn this around. Breed homogenisation. I'm really pleased I took the simple option on this one, because I would have been well out of my depth here. But for those that know Andrew's Dexters, I'm assuming most of the people here will know Andrew's Dexters, and effectively they're probably some of the most traditional Dexters in the UK, probably in the world. Philippe, I sort of asked. And how many girls has he got left that have been moved? 10, 15? Yeah. 17 of the traditional breeds. But there were over 2,000 girls born last year, heifers born last year. So is the Dexter rare? Is the Dexter rare because there's 2,000, or is it rare because there's an original population? And I think I'll come back and Libby will have a debate about that one forever. But do think about it. Breeds are not just breeds, and when you do genetic analysis as it's come out, sometimes there are populations over there. But I think we need to, from our world and whatever, we need to decide whether, not necessarily what the rules are, but what we want to keep and what we need to keep. Because our job is to keep these for the good of the people. So keeping genetics that we might never need, because it's already there, is an interesting debate. And I think there's no black and white in any of these conversations. You'll be pleased, I'm getting close to the end. Measurements going forward. I think it's quite important that we frame what is happening going forward. Genomics, molecular genetics, are game changers. They are going to be game changers, but like any science, we have to make sure that we're getting the right results out from those game changers. Because I think with many things, like statistics, we can prove what we want to hear. And we've got to be very careful we don't just prove what we want to hear. But I do think there'll be massive game changers, and there'll be populations that we know where we think we've lost things and can come back in. I was sort of slightly dismissive of affected populations or just how many girls were born last year. But I think it's a fantastic benchmark, and it's something that we can all understand. And if you make things complicated, they don't normally work, and I think we should always look at that. And I think our watch list or the native breeds at risk register will be important in 20 years' time. There is more significant changes to happen, more sophistication breeding programs, and we all need to get on board. Like Rex was saying, there are people that are 20 years behind the thinking, but it's their animals, they can do what they want. So we just have to educate our own in a way. Our gene bank, our national gene bank, and I do say very much national gene bank, and we're hoping to not just own it ourselves. The BPA and ourselves have got a joint gene bank effectively. The National Sheep Association ourselves have got a good gene bank. The Dexters have just slowed down about joining their gene bank, but are about to join our gene bank in the next year or so and have it. It doesn't have to belong to us. We're talking hopefully with other people abroad that may have things. So, but I actually think that what was collected, and I've heard some people call it a stamp collection, I actually think at some point it might even come back to being actually a commercially viable collection. If we was to go out and collect that, and we haven't spent it, but what's in that gene bank today would cost £10 million to collect. I know that because we've just done the calculations what it's going to do to complete the gene bank technically, and we're about halfway full. So it's about £10 million to fill the gene bank up and save our native breeds, and that's excluding poultry. And those that have seen Mike McGrew up at Roslyn's work, I think we'll be starting to gene bank poultry down the track. And I also think that gene banking and gene breed re-establishment in 10 years' time will be completely unrecognisable to us all. And I think I'm going to pass a copy of Jurassic Park around, which we'd have all sort of laughed at. I don't know how old that thing was, but I was filmed next to with your brother, next to a cloned horse, Libby, about 2 months ago, and neither of us really batted an eyelid the fact it was cloned. We weren't even asking whether it was a healthy animal anymore, but we were having the debate whether it was right or wrong. So I think it will do. So just to sum up, I am trying to get going. Sorry, Philippe. I can see you keep looking at your watch. That's the conservation, breeding and livestock genetics. Is the UK achieving its goals? I think we need to, I've said politely, review our goals. I think we need to make sure we actually state our goals quite simply so that Joe Public can understand them. And I think we, as an organisation, and to help others, we need to work outside our own group. At the moment, when we go, one of our main things for talking to people is going to agricultural shows, and all we're doing is talking to the same few hundred people, few thousand people, few 100,000 people. We've got to go back out and talk to a much wider thing, and I think Beth just had a great campaign, Beth. How many letters have we got back from MPs? Lots. So, and it's important we do that. You know, we've got to get people, MPs don't know who we are, yeah? And they don't know who we are, and I'm talking about the bigger we in this thing. They don't know we exist. If we don't tell them we exist, nobody else is going to tell them. And we obviously have to embrace the science. We really have to support our breeders. I think one of my big jobs is not just doing the genetics work, but is actually to go out and sell Dexter meat, go out and get it onto agendas, onto menus and do that. We have to increase demand for these products. That might be on a nature reserve as well. So I'm just going to be quiet for a second. I haven't really talked about equines here, but this is, I'm not doing this from a campaign point of view, but it's some work that Beth has done for something different. Tim, I think it was done for your National Equine Forum thing, but we were asked to put something together, but I think this sort of sums up a lot of things. If we don't actually do our job at RBST, what's going to happen and how close we are, and that was not the end of the slideshow. Beth. There should be a speaker on this, but I won't talk over it too much.
Spent £1.5 million on those brand new facilities here. We've built a state-of-the-art laboratory. we've made an extender or medium that we put into the semen, and that actually frees it at minus 196 degrees. So in 10, 20, 30 or 40 years time, we can actually repopulate a generation with that genetic line. It's amazing how you can bring something back to life that is so cold and then straight away get pregnancies. It's quite amazing.